Hey guys, Damien here. As I continue to interview the top MSPs in the world, one thing has become incredibly clear. It's time that we let go. Even more than that, every time I focus on my zone of genius and get out of the way and do the very few things I'm good at and delegate to others, I'm ready for that next level of growth. So if you're ready for that next level of growth, one way that I could help you is with Servosity. We co-manage your backups and disaster recovery so you can focus on what you do best, let us do the rest, and then what we do is we test the backups every single day so you never have to worry. If you'd like to learn more, click the link below.
And I'm not giving any nuggets because it's just things that happen by doing a bunch of little things. But I think the consistency is the big piece of it. And that's probably one word that people forget about is you have to be extremely consistent in your process, how you treat your clients, how you manage the team, what the expectations are of everybody, and communicate.
Hey guys, Damien Stevens, host of MSP Mindset, founder and CEO of Servosity. Today, I continue my mission to interview 100 of the fastest growing and most interesting MSPs on the planet. Today, I am blessed to be joined by Greg Zolkos. He managed best-in-class growth every year and built a $10 million MSP. However, it was born out of a single client leaving that cost him almost all of his revenue. And the decisions he had to make next, he couldn't imagine where they would take him. If you want a masterclass on how to grow your MSP and take care of your team so they take care of your clients like nobody else, don't miss out on my conversation with Greg today. Greg, tell me why you started Atlas and how you got started with Atlas.
Yeah, my origin story isn't your typical, engineer turned MSP operator or even somebody that developed a business plan and went to market. So I worked for a company for 10 years that bought and sold public and private entities that were mostly distressed. There was one primary company that was very financially mature, did really well. It was in the construction services area, manufacturing of products. And during my course working for him, I worked for nutraceutical, pharmaceutical, home health care, recycling, alternative fuels, you name it. And he was acquiring it. Working with it. Again, they're all distressed. So there's all unique situations. And oftentimes I'd go in and I would consolidate the IT, make it a little bit more efficient, bring it back to our central data center, and then manage it from there. And other times I would, chop up pieces of the business and break them out and reallocate, where that hardware was or the resources. So had a lot of experience really fast in a 10-year stretch with him. And he had asked me to start a company. At the time, I was doing not just IT, but I was also helping him with their inventory control, a lot of their financial practices around those components, the chart of accounts, the mapping of the data back and forth between different systems. And of course, somehow ended up dealing with a lot of payroll and making that a little bit more efficient for him. And keeping labor costs and some other things under control. So I started Atlas Professional Services because it was IT, accounting, HR, which is the name of the company I founded in Tampa. In the short period of time after founding the company, setting up a new office, taking on a ton of debt, the real estate market pretty much crashed in the entire country in 2006 to 2007. So it's during that stretch when things started changing real quick for me. And my primary company that supported and paid me was the only one that was, cash flow positive per se. And they went from about a $200 million company overnight to in the 30s, which changed the structure of everything they did, changed my relationship with them. And what ended up happening was I went from supporting about 15 businesses for him that were paying me different contract levels to do all the things, to having one company that could afford to pay me. That company's runway became really short. So I had a brand new company, a ton of debt, and nobody that could afford to pay me. And it was like one of those oh shit moments.
Yeah. The
So,
perfect way to start a business, right?
yeah. And if I'm being brutally honest, I bought a bag of ice and a bottle of rum and I sat down with somebody that was working with me and I'm like, dude, we need to figure something out. So,
It's an
and
awesome origin story.
it's kind of how it happened. And, we're sitting in that office we'd renovated with expensive rent and all the things and looking around. I'm like, well, this is gone. We're going to go work out of our houses. I'm going to start consulting. And I called a bunch of people that I was helping on nights and weekends. So I had a mortgage company, a CPA firm, a bunch of little, small businesses, professional services that I had helped with IT, and said, I used to help you on nights and weekends. I can help you whenever you want now. You don't need to wait on me. And I started building out my network that way. Then they would tell me, oh, I have a friend that has this problem and I know you can help them. And I'd go in and I'd fix the problem and I'd turn it into a billable engagement. And back then it was, everything was per hour. And I was at a client's office, and it's confusing because one is called One Source, one is called My Source, and One Source was subleasing from My Source, and One Source is in the durable medical equipment space, and My Source was in the employment, the recruiting space, mostly IT. And I was helping the One Source guys with something, and the other team had a problem with their phones. Like, hey, I've got the tools in the car. Let me go. I'll go grab them and help you. He's like, you don't know anything about phones. You're a computer guy. I was like, actually, I do. So I went, did everything he needed me to do. Ended up developing a relationship with him, and then working with this one guy that did all his firewall security stuff. And we butt heads really bad. And I felt I was right on something. His firewall guy thought he was right. We went back and forth. I ended up winning that argument, but a couple months later, he said, hey, I've got this guy that's been displaced through acquisition. Really like you to consider hiring him. You're going to get so busy that I'm not going to be patient and wait for you any longer. And unless you start building a team, and the first thing I thought is, oh, it's a recruiting company. He wants 20% of the guy's salary, right?
Right.
And that wasn't the case. He was truly trying to help me and mentor me. So I went to lunch, and of course it was that guy that I did not get along with already over the phone. But he's very energetic, right? And he brought his pay stub, and he brought a bunch of stuff. He's like, this is all I need to make. And I'm trying to do the math in my head. I'm like, oh man, the guy needs to make more money than I'm paying myself. Like this is, it's tough. But what he did have was he had a list of a bunch of companies that he had been doing consulting for. And on that list was how many hours he had done. And then he went through, I don't know anything about taxes. I don't know anything about payroll. I don't even know how to bill these people, collect the people. I don't know how to set up a company. I don't know how to do all these things. I just want a job. And I was like, there's a lot of people out there like that probably have these skills, have relationships, that don't want to deal with all the bullshit you really deal with as a business owner.
Right.
So, I of course said, what are the chances all these people are going to pay? He's like, oh, they'll 100% pay me. I've done all the work. I said, okay. So you've got a backlog of money due. And I was like,
let me unpack that.
Yeah.
He's not just saying like, this is what I've built before, so maybe in the future we could do this. He's literally coming to you with, there's a bunch of IOUs if you collect them.
I've been helping people for a couple of months, and I don't know how to do any of the pieces that are going to collect this money. So I looked at him, I said, well, his name is Jeff, and it's Jeff with one F. So to back up a little bit, that's because 80s arcade games only held 3 letters. So I'm like, he's your guy, right? He is the IT guy. And he's still at Atlas today. So I believe he celebrates 16 years this year. So in July. So Jeff has this backlog. I said, well, how do I bill them? What do I write? Like, what did you do for them? He's like, just put fixed miscellaneous computer issues. And, me being a little bit pessimistic, I'm like, there's no way this is going to work, but hey, let's try it. Right.
Yeah.
So when I hired Jeff, I felt like I took no risk. I had probably about a good month and a half, maybe 2 months of his pay covered, through his backlog. Then it was up to me. I felt, right, if I'm going to try to make this a real business, to do it on my own, I have to fill his time or reallocate my time to higher level activities. So we executed on his plan and sent out a bunch of invoices, and I'd say about 80% of people paid with no question.
Wow.
And what I learned was having a great resource, technical or otherwise, people follow good people. So I would say in the early stages, about once every 2 weeks, Jeff would get a phone call, somebody saying, been trying to track you down. What are you doing? We need help. And some of those opportunities we walked away with, a couple 40-hour retainers. Some of the situations, it was just a quick, 4-hour fix. And, back then it was break fix. It was easy as you bill per time. And I know I gave away tons of free time, so the model was broken. I'm guilty of it now. We know techs have a difficult time entering time in today's situation with managed services. So you can only imagine what it's like when you're giving away billable time per hour.
Yeah.
So I talked to Jeff for a little while, said, hey, who else did you used to work with, you liked, you trust, right? Then we got Art. Art came on board and people followed Art. And then I said, well, there's actually something here where, I'm finding good people and they're bringing talent. So every time they would bring clients or opportunities, I would elevate their pay or do something for them to help compensate for that additional revenue stream. Just kept slowly building that out over time. I'd say when we got to about, 18 employees, that was a very difficult model to continue to follow. It seemed like, all those wells would run dry.
So hold on, you got to 18 employees via
referral
from employee to employee.
And sometimes from customer and sometimes from a friend. And it was that way was the model that had worked. And there's an instance where it was, I think 2013 is when we truly made the shift to managed services. And I had been quoting against it. And truthfully, you can sell against each side of the house, right? You can say, okay, one, you're paying a default rate per month and you never know what you're going to get. And their goal is to do less time because then they make more money per hour. Then, so that was my selling point against managed services for a while when I was fighting.
Interesting that you sold against it. Yeah.
Yeah, I sold against it in the beginning, and I'd say, hey, look, they're selling you this flat plan. That's great. I think I can do it with this many hours. And typically I would, come out on the positive on that. And sometimes a client would pay a little bit more. And then I remember an opportunity I was selling to, and I was within $30 of their managed services quote selling in my method. And I'm like, there might be a problem here. If I'm offering them this and it's about the same, I might as well just make this a flat fee type of engagement. And they didn't go with us because they loved their tech. And they mentioned his name, and his name's Ben. And Ben now has a flourishing career at Microsoft. And I feel fortunate to have been part of his, journey for 8 years, and we're great friends. And we probably talk 2-3 times a week. But so I found out, I was like, well, Stuart, you used to work with Ben. Like, how do I get in front of Ben? Right. It was that same mentality again. And I went and I sat down with Ben, and I had one meeting with him, and, Ben had a couple daughters. I had a couple daughters. We had a lot of similarities in our life. And I remember driving away from there. I ordered Ben a laptop, ordered him a phone, and I hadn't even sent him a job offer. And at the time, people are like, you're absolutely crazy. I was like, oh, no, he's going to take it. I just have this feeling. So Ben came on board, and we went back to that company, presented him with managed services, and they signed right away. And then Ben had a good following, right? So then once he was there for about 6 months, I gave him an immediate compensation adjustment because he'd brought in a significant amount of revenue, and I thought it was the right thing to do. So there's a lot of stories like that happened over time, stories that I'm probably not telling you, or, there's the time I decided, well, voice and IT are converging. I should start a telephony company built in Atlas and let me go out and be certified in these technologies and get some service vehicles and hire some people. And, a year later you go, well, that was a mistake. Let me sell those cars and let me get rid of this. And, there's things like that. Or when, I was so used to paying taxes on an annual basis, and, your payroll taxes happen quarterly and all that kind of stuff. And, I'm collecting tax for hardware and I'm not submitting it. I'm not understanding how to submit it because I was never trained on that, right? My CPA actually didn't even tell me. You get a letter from the Attorney General saying, hey, come down to a courthouse with a check and figure this out. It's like, so there's those stories too, right? Of where you have these lessons that you only need to learn once. to figure them out. And then there's the positives of it. I mean, building the business was not easy. I tell you, there was at least 5 times I threw my hand up and I was like, just give me a job and take my clients and get rid of this nightmare for me.
I think we've all been there.
Yeah. And it's waking up and being willing to deal with that. And, my life for a long period of time was an inventory concept that is not a good one to practice with your time. And it was first in, last out.
Mm-hmm.
And people would walk in like, dude, you need to get out of here. I'm like, well, there's too much to do. I'm the engineer. I'm the salesperson. I'm the accountant.
Yeah.
I'm the janitor. I'm the, I'm everything. So, I started realizing when I'd say, again, we're in that 12-person range that I had to get out of my own way and I had to start hiring people who could take a lot of the burden off my plate. And even if they weren't,
you said around 12.
I'd say around 10, 12 people.
Now, when did you make the transition to managed services?
It's right around, it's about the same time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And at that time it was, it was close to a frat house, or we just pick up the phone, deal with the ticket. It's a bunch of dudes. We had a client approach us. She didn't want to move for her company. And Linda's still there again, another example. And I said, Linda, it's a bunch of dudes. Like, are you sure you want to work here? And she's like, absolutely. Grew up in New York. My family owned bars. We had pool halls. Like, I'll be fine. I'm like, perfect. So that was a good segue into building out like a female tech presence, which I think has a lot of value. And not a lot of people, I think, understand that we need to have like a diverse culture and have people with different perspectives that are different than our traditional model. And she helped the thought process, and she was a really good systems person. So when I made the transition to managed services, I knew that I needed something to manage all the tickets, something to manage the agreements, something to do workflows and help us with our day to day. But I knew I was not the one to implement it. But Alinda, who was detail oriented, process driven, she was the one. And back then I did a lot of cultural assessments, and I took a look at like her and Stuart, and their mappings were almost identical, like every graph, every point. But one was male, one was female. So I knew who I needed to have involved in my processes. It was definitely Stuart and Linda. And then I started thinking about other areas that were bothering me, and I had a friend, and he had a controller level resource, was working with him. He was switching career paths and starting a different company, and the controller wasn't happy where he was. So I took him to a football game, talked to him for a little while, said, and I kind of knew him through them because they were clients too. And I said, how would you feel about moving to IT space? Like, it's very like predictable revenue. You don't have to worry about, investors pumping in money and this happening and your coffers running empty. And he's like, he's very black and white. He's accountant. He's like, I love the idea of having consistent, stable income. So we sat down, put something together and made it happen. And that was, I think, of all the hires I had. Once I got past Jeff, I felt, listen, it's 8 hours to support you, 10 hours to support you, 12 here, whatever. Like, my mind worked really well around that. When you hire a controller, an accountant, I looked at him like, this is an expense. Like, initially I was fighting myself mentally. And it's not a good fight, because I think a lot of MSPs really struggle around finance, and it's an area for a huge uplift in their business. But so once I got through the mental challenges of hiring Adrian, who again is still there, 12 years later. And I think that speaks to the stability of these companies. The more you keep the retention in place, the stronger they are. But got around the mental hurdles of hiring Adrian, put him in place, and cash flow went from here to here, right? Things were happening as they're supposed to happen, not when Greg had time.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What were some of those mental hurdles? Because I think we can all relate to saying, this is not billable. So I'm curious what was going through your head.
I mean, you take a look at like the monthly cost to sustain a person like that, and then how many hours I needed to recoup to offset that investment, right? Or what I was taking away from what I was able to bring to my household at the time. Because it's just me. So you're trying to think of all these things like, well, either I'm giving up how much money I'm paying him, or I need to find ways to recoup that in the business.
Mm-hmm.
And then how can I slowly do that? So my mind had always worked very simple with the money concept of the net new logos and the new things we're adding. And, if we were bringing on a client and adding backup services, I'm like, okay, that's $200 a month profit. That's going to cover fuel, and this is this, and that's going to cover the utility bill. And I would break it down to like little chunks. You're not looking at eating a whole elephant, right? The only way to finish the whole elephant is take a bite at a time. You can't just eat it all at once. So I'd look at all these little chunks as phases and milestones. And with Adrian, I was still like, my initial hurdles were just wrapping around the elephant. And I'm like, how do I break this down? But what happened is, once I put somebody in place like that, I no longer missed billing somebody for a $10,000 server, because that definitely happened, right? And you go back and have a conversation with a client, and you're like, hey, still need to do this. He goes, you guys installed that server 6 months ago. I'm like, well, I didn't bill you for it, so I'll be sending you that invoice later today. Well, if I was going to make, I don't know, $1,500, $2,000 in that piece of hardware, and I had the carrying cost of that for 10 months, probably made $100. So, there's a cost to that, and it disrupted cash flow. And it's probably one of the reasons why I didn't pay sales and use tax in the early days, right? Because I was using it to finance something else, because I wasn't paying attention to all the little pieces that I should. And having somebody like that just solely focused on their job, who really gets it and you can delegate it to and trust, I mean, that's a big piece of it, right? And also have them there as like a devil's advocate. So when you say, hey, I want to do this, they go, well, let's do that, but let's do it over a period of time versus doing it all at once, because here's what will happen with cash or operations or et cetera. So there's a lot of mental hurdles there, man. I could probably talk about that one just for 2 hours by itself, but what it did was it freed up my time to focus again on higher level activity. So every time I hired somebody, I was able to step out of something that I thought I was good or great at and make somebody like exceptional. Like that was their sole job, their sole purpose.
I want to kind of dig deeper there, because you said you didn't come at this like the stereotypical engineer, right? And the problem is I did. And the problem is I often didn't let go. I became the escalation. I became and so how is it that you always had this mindset of, I'm going to step back and go focus on another part of the business and make them exceptional?
I don't know. And see some of it is happen chance, right? You hire somebody and you start realizing, oh, wow, I can trust them to do this. And again, I can work alongside of them. I can configure the firewall, the SAN. I can be an escalation point. But I have this many people, this many clients and employees and team members trying to contact me. I can't be everything to all. And I felt a lot of stress. And it was a lot of late nights, and I put things in place. And what the light bulb for me was, I had given everybody else a quality of life except for me. And I was, where it gets you is, you're walking your children into Animal Kingdom, right? Or into Disney, and you're sitting there and you're like, you're getting ready to start this magical Disney experience and day with your kids. And you're all excited about them being, present, getting them the Mickey Mouse ears and all the things. And your phone rings and you look at it and it's a client saying, my firewall's down. I know it's a Saturday, but we're trying to do X, Y, Z. I've tried calling Jeff. I've tried calling Art. I'm going, well, they're probably out at the beach. It's the weekend. Like Art's playing volleyball. I know what Art's doing. Jeff's probably over his friend's house helping him build something. And I'm going, great. Guess there's one resource left, right? And so you look at your children and you say, hey, Daddy will be back, right? And that's a really shitty feeling. And so if I remembered those feelings, and, I wanted to be like a hero to my daughters. I didn't want to be the guy that was like not present.
Right.
And they call them glass ball moments. Some people do, I guess. It's you never want to have to drop those glass ball moments, right? Because they'll shatter. So, actually getting weirdly emotional right now. Sorry. But so I had to,
your family.
you had to like, you basically push them into the theme park, get back in your car, drive back to the hotel, crank up the internet and get to work and kind of walk somebody through fixing something. And in that case, I think I was able to meet them within about 2 hours, but that was 2 hours that I missed out on a lot of experiences, right? And I had to refer to pictures versus having those memories.
Yeah.
And memories with the kids, I mean, they go so fast. Those were the things that kind of got me to the point where I was like, hey, I always told people, get out of my own way. I want to be able to get out of my own way, have the vision, have the path, and then be able to know enough intelligently about it to ask questions and check. So I'm not a CPA, but I understand most of the rules around GAAP accounting, what we should be doing to defer accrue income, how we handle treatment of things, right? Whether it's a liability, all that kind of stuff, but not at an Adrian level, and
Right.
and nor do I ever want to be, but I at least want to be able to talk to him about it. I understand what goes into the security pieces of the firewalls and how we would configure a SAN and differentiate some of the storage and the things we would do in those. And, I understood how to run service delivery. I would be horrible at it because my patience wouldn't be good to train people. So I knew that I wasn't a good trainer. So I would find people who were patient, willing to train. Because in my mind, if I show you something twice, you should know it. And that's just the way I am, but that's not the way everybody is. So I made a very conscious effort based upon the lifestyle I wanted to live, what I thought my children's expectations were of me. And then, how I was raised. My father was a dairy farmer. I grew up on a farm. We did not see Dad. He was gone at 4 a.m. and he'd be home for dinner. And we didn't go on family vacations and we didn't have those things. So my mind is I want to do all the things that I missed out on as a child and make sure that I'm present in the way that my family needs me. So
Yeah.
I guess I say it's one thing. It's a lot of little instances like that probably stacked up and added up over time. Then realizing that the people I hired and put in place as team members were really looking out for my best interest too. And understood, the assignment of what we're looking for, and hiring people outside of the industry helped because of their perspectives, right? I didn't go find a service manager that ran an MSP. I found one that ran a service business that was, dispatching people and, humans doing infrastructure work, things like that, a little bit different, but a very process driven individual. And they put things in place, right? And they built upon that. And then we worked together to refine it based upon the needs of our industry. So
what made you decide to look outside of the industry?
I had found, other than the techs that needed to understand the technology piece of what they were supporting, and even in that case, I didn't hire a lot of MSP people. They were people that were IT people, that were high-level IT people that could also fix a printer if I asked them to. Yeah. It was just the idea that I would get a different perspective than I would if they came from an MSP, because I didn't want to do exactly what everybody else did. And oftentimes I'd go to the ConnectWise conferences and I'd meet people and they would have I did it this way because my peer group told me and it's working for them. And I'm like, that's good, but I want to kind of check that and balance it out. I want the peer group piece and I want to understand what's working for them. And I want to see what works in other businesses and other industries, because other industries have things figured out a little bit ahead of us oftentimes.
Right.
I got a lot of my early advice from, again, a guy that ran a technology staffing firm was one of my mentors. A guy that ran an HOA company, so like a homeowner association, has nothing to do with anything we do. And all he does is receive complaints. But I understood that piece, right? The soft skill piece, the customer service piece of his business and what he did, how he managed his 150 person team when I'm trying to manage 7 people. So that was super valuable. And it gave me insight into how to scale some of the things. And then I had a mentor that was on the construction side of the house and mostly commercial construction, development construction, in the business he built, managing his teams who are out in the field. Because then you have that field component of what are they really doing? Are they getting the job done? Are they reporting back the data so we can make proper decisions? So I just felt we as MSPs have a lot to learn from each other. And I truly believe that, but we also need to try to understand other people's businesses and take some of the lessons they've learned and incorporate them into our world to make us a little bit stronger. So
I couldn't agree more. So I want to kind of break some of this down. You built Atlas from 0 to 10 million?
Yeah, it was right around 10 when I exited.
So that puts you in the top 1% or less.
Something like that. Yeah. That was my goal, was to get up to around there, and didn't want to be greedy. So again, my upbringing, I didn't have a ton growing up on a farm. So there's not a high bar there, but there was a bar.
Yeah.
And I was above the bar. And again, my CFO, now Adrian is now CFO versus controller. He elevated over time. We sat down. I was like, look, I always said this. And he's like, no, you always told me when you got to a certain spot, we need to consider it. He was very gracious about it. And once I realized that other people on the team were very supportive of my decision to exit, that they knew that I had worked really hard to that point. I mean, it had been 16 years. Extremely supportive, wanted to make sure I took care of my family, understood what I was doing, understood my selection process on who I chose and why I chose them, which was super important to me. Everybody stood behind it, and we'd lost 0 people at the transition, which was the intended result.
So, that's amazing. Yeah. So I want to come back to that, talk about that more. But before we get into that, what do you attribute to this, very, right, 99% don't make it to 10 million. Like, what do you attribute to that level of growth and being able to maintain that?
I think you have to be nimble. Is a big key to all this, is you take some of the defeat, some of the lessons learned, and you have to adjust. We were very big on culture. I was very big on retention. I wanted to keep the team together. I mean, we lost our first employee, and it was his choice to leave. And it wasn't because of anything we did, but it was super hard for me to get through. And it's almost like you're dating someone. You're like, well, what did I do wrong? Right? Like, how could we have made this better? And what I learned was, this gentleman, Ron, his fiance at the time, and maybe they were just boyfriend, girlfriend, but she had taken a regional level job with a very large enterprise we probably all shop at. And it made sense for him financially to follow her. At the time, she was the breadwinner. I was like, well, dude, you got to go where the money is. I don't like it, And what we did for a little while, I was like, look, until you land on your feet, because he's moving to the Nashville area, I was like, why don't you just take some tickets for us, work remote the best you can? And that's what we did. And I think that lasted 45 days or so. And then he landed at an MSP. And he spent the better part of 5 years there, very well-known MSP in Nashville. And then she moved to the Panhandle, and Ron did what Ron should do, and Ron followed her again. And he went to the Panhandle. He worked for an MSP there. He actually called shortly after I sold, and he's like, hey, we're moving back to Tampa. I was like, you have a home here. I will figure it out. We don't have a seat for you, but it's like you find the right people, right? And then you kind of build things around them sometimes. And I was always a big believer that sometimes you need to stack your bench ahead of the game. I learned early on that, like, adding people after you've added all the revenue isn't always the best idea. But if you have predictable ways and metrics in place to see your growth, you understand your pipeline and the opportunities you're working on, I can get people ahead of time, get them trained. So when that happens, they're ready to go. So we found a spot for Ron. He's back. It's a great feeling, but I think the retention piece, when you say that, and the relationships you have with the team, community, and your clients are definitely a huge part of the growth. And a lot of it, I guess for us, a lot of it is owner-led sales. So that's a huge one to get out of your way. And I used to get super excited when somebody, they'd ask a question about a client. I was like, I've actually never met them. And I feel bad, I should, but it also gave me a lot of, excitement that I wasn't involved in the whole, I didn't need to be involved in the whole process. I wasn't needed at that level. I'd rather be wanted for that than needed, right? Because if I'm needed, then it doesn't happen without me. If I'm wanted, it's like a little bonus. And sometimes those conversations happen, right? They want the executive presence, but going back to, I guess, the root of the question, a lot of the success was around retention on both sides of the house. And I think if you do a really good job retaining your key people and you make the service delivery, their contacts, all the pieces of the business that you're doing for them and supporting them consistent, that then translates into retention with your clients. And a lot of it is doing the right thing too.
So tell me more about that, right? Because culture is everything and also hard to define.
Yeah.
But I see clearly in your story, taking care of the right people and having really, really strong retention of your team seems to be kind of the underpinning. So how did you make that work? Like, how did you actually do that? Because it's easy to say, I want that. It's much harder to do it.
And and culture's like a living, breathing thing in your company, or at least I feel it is. In the early days, it was super easy, right? There's 4 of us. We go to lunch every day. Greg buys the tab. People love that. It's like, it's great. We're going to lunch. We're getting a free lunch. And then as you expand, you realize, well, I can't afford to take everybody to lunch every day. This is adding up. Why don't we do something weekly or whatever we do, right? We have other events and things. And then you have to build upon that. You have to incorporate other activities and other things. You have to find out that Jeff loved toys. Of all the things, I get Jeff, sometimes it was sunglasses. Sometimes it was the Oakley kitchen sink backpack because it's the coolest backpack he'd ever seen. And one time it's a watch, or, little things that motivated Jeff were different than what motivated Art. And then what motivated Terry or Adrian. So I had to learn, Adrian liked to go to Lightning hockey games. It's a walk from him in Channelside in Tampa, and they're tons of fun, huge energy. So get some Lightning tickets, right? Then you kind of figure out like what drives them, what interests them. Linda's a huge Yankees fan. Well, I was born in New England, so that doesn't really fly for me. But she loves Derek Jeter, so I got her something really nice with Derek Jeter on it for her office. It was painful to buy, but it made because she knew that, right, it had more value. And then when she had her 10-year, she wanted to do a trip back home to New York, so we got her first class tickets, put her in a hotel in Central Park, got her Yankees tickets behind home plate so she could stare at the players, right? So we did all those things, gave her some money to go shopping so she could go get her favorite purse. Like, that was different than what I did for Jeff's 10-year experience, which was different than what I did for Terry's. What I did is different for, Scott's, for Adrian's, and a few of them got watches because they were watch people. And I thought that was super cool because every time you look at it, you remember, well, this is from Atlas for being there for 10 years or whatever. Other people got vacations because they wanted memories, and some people got a watch and some money for their kids $5.29 because there was money left over. Like, it's just, you have to figure out what values them. And I think, again, early on, it was super easy, lunches, little gifts, trinkets, things like that. Then as we start growing into this, 18, 25, 30, 40 person company is something we had to continuously work on. So what I did, as we were about 20 employees, is there's a deck of cards, and they're values cards, and they'll have words on it like faith, integrity, let's think, family, all different types of things that are important to you. And I'd sit down with everybody, and I built a spreadsheet, which is super easy to do, right? And I say, pick your top 5 cars, right? Which cars resonate with you the most of what you believe are your true values and what drives you. And they would pick, and they'd end up with 10 cars. I'm like, all right, we're going to have to narrow this down. Then we keep going until I got their top 5. And then I did that with everybody, and I still have the spreadsheet. And I would look, and almost everybody had something around family, friendship, like community. I'm like, okay, so relationships was a big one to us, right? And then everybody said, look, honesty is huge to me, integrity, so we of course added the word integrity. And then everybody believed that like teamwork and collaboration. And so then we like, okay, so the word we're choosing is collaboration. And then they all wanted to be somewhere fun and enjoyable. And it was like, the jovial thing, all that kept coming up and what their values were. So we added humor. So then we just decided we'd make an acronym called RICH, and it was relationships, integrity, collaboration, and humor. And then that was the culture that we would embody in Atlas. And what we meant by that was, we believe that every relationship, whether it was with each other, with our clients, with the community, like those were important to the success of Atlas, right? And if you believe that and you focus on that and you take care of people, when I go to a lightning game with Adrian, I don't have to pull down my hat and be like, oh, that's so-and-so, right? And go the other way. It's you walk up, you say hi, good to see you. You know, it's a whole different feeling than feeling like you didn't do something right by somebody.
Right.
Which then immediately translated into the integrity piece, right? We always do the right thing. And listen, we're not perfect. Never say we're perfect. We're always working on something.
Right.
But if we mess something up, we made it right. And we told the client, like, here's the root cause analysis. It was us this time. This is what we missed. We missed this checkbox on your redundancy on your firewall. That's why when the internet went down, it took us 15 minutes to get the other one active. Or in the other case, you don't have a secondary internet. That's on you. This is a recommendation we've been making to you for multiple times, right? So it's just making sure you're transparent with them. Transparency was a huge piece of what I believe a lot of our success was, because we gave them all the tools in real time to where they could see and they could police us, where I'm not handing them a health report, you know, and saying, okay, it's the end of the month, everything's green, right? They can log in at any time and say, where are you with this ticket? What's going on with this? Why is my disk space running low on here? They see everything. And then the collaboration piece, we cannot be successful if we're not teaching each other. So if I don't take lessons I've learned, share them with the team or a customer service experience, and then translate that to them to say, hey, when I was at the hockey game with Adrian and I blew out my flip flop and I was walking around like a clumsy fool, somebody saw that and they literally brought me flip flops to my seat. And I was in so much shock, I didn't even know what to do to the girl. I was like, then somebody tapped me, like, give her $20. I'm like, okay, yeah, here. So that was a level of customer service you wouldn't expect at a hockey game. So then how do I take that message and teach it to my team that we're not just fixing computers, right? There's other things we need to be doing during that journey and experience with our customers. And making sure I was good about sharing those experiences, whether it was written or verbal. And then, teach. When I was young and I first started out in the career, I had not really touched a computer until I was 19. So when I got into the field, I would hire consultants that I would say, hey, I want to learn from you. And if they would tell me no, I'd say, well, then call the company, we'll get somebody else. And that's what I would do until I get somebody that would actually coach me and show me why they were doing the things versus just doing them. So I made sure our team takes a lot of time and they do a lot of coaching and training and development on that piece. We actually carve out time every week for them to do advanced training and get certifications. It's actually on our time versus them having to do it on nights and weekends, which they can still do. But we do want to make sure we give them space for that. And then the humor piece was, I believe you have to really enjoy who you work with. You have to be able to have a good time. I mean, if you look at our wake hours, it's about 50-50. We're with our family and we're with our teams about 50% of the time. And I wanted to make sure that was an enjoyable experience. And that ties into so many other lessons I think MSP should have. I mean, we were very clear on what our client profile should look like and what we considered good and bad clients. And we all know them. We've all had them. And there's certain industries that we didn't service. And I've said this many times, and some people just look at me like I'm crazy, but hospitality and retail never worked for us. It just was never a good market. We did really well with professional services, manufacturing, medical, but just not hospitality retail. And we learned, or I learned really on, that we should never do business with assholes. And I consider that a whole industry in itself. And we had a very unfortunate experience where, I've mentioned a lot of names as we've been chatting. And I think it was Linda, and she came to me almost in tears, and a couple other people like, look, this company has been so difficult to work with. They're holding us accountable to all these things. When I call, when I email, when I walk over and visit them, they won't let me fix the problem, but they want to complain.
Yeah.
And I knew the owner really well, and I went to him. I said, hey, this is what's happening. And he wasn't supportive of his team with this behavior. And I said, you have 90 days to transition us out. And the part of this that was really scary was he was my largest client by far, double the revenue of anybody else.
No, wait, he said you have 90 days?
I told him he had 90 days. You told him. Okay. So we decided to fire him.
Yeah.
And again, I was, doing one of these, walking out of there like, what did I just do? I'm an idiot.
All right.
But I wanted the team to know that I didn't value money over them. And that was an important lesson, I think, for the company, that we're not just going to get, I'll say beat on, because I don't want to, there's other words I could say, but I just want them to get beat on for the sake of Greg making a little bit more money, right? I didn't think that was the right message to portray. So we ended up having a going away party with cake, whole celebration, everything. And then 2 weeks later, I was at IT Nation at ConnectWise, and I, per usual, was late registering for a breakout session and had to sit outside. So I'm sitting outside in a chair, figuring out my schedule and another thing I want to go visit. And I get a phone call. And it's a lady we'd done a little bit of work for, and they wanted to make a lot of changes, wanted to bring us in for more. Well, there goes 70% of the revenue I just lost.
Oh, wow.
And then as I'm completing that call and doing a couple other things, I get another phone call. And it was, hey, I was referred to you by XYZ and and we need you to come in, and there's not a lot to talk about. This is what the environment is. When can you start? I'm like, well, there's the rest of the revenue, right?
Wow.
And within a couple months, I did some analysis on the revenue, and it was more profitable, less aggravation.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so now we need to start looking at who else do we have that's causing us trouble? Are we profitable on them? Are we wasting a lot of time? Am I going to have retention issues with my team? Or are they going to hang up the phone from them and be in a bad mood and take it out on the next guy, right? Because that how you answer the phone, right? And that you feel that through the phone oftentimes with the service delivery. So that was a hard lesson to learn that I think a lot of people are afraid of. And I've talked to many people that have had, $5-6 million companies, like, oh yeah, we wouldn't do that. I was like, yeah, but your team may act a little differently and rally, and you might have been able to keep John or Jim or whoever that was for an extra 5 years. And that definitely helped, because our makeup of retention, I mean, there's more than 50% or more than 5-year clients, and there's a significant portion that are 10 plus, I want to say.
Wow.
Actually, no, it was 10 plus is over 50%. 5 years was even higher. So.
Wow. That speaks for itself. We were talking before this, kind of backstage before, around how that was actually a big part of your growth. And obviously keeping people is better, right? That sounds good. But tell me why that was, because I think everybody says, we try to keep people, we quote unquote do our best. But did that really make a difference in your growth?
I mean, I probably have to break down numbers to get into the real hard facts about that. But the fact that we're able to retain the key people, and those key people brought other people they trusted. So other technicians, whether it was an accountant or whatever, they all had their own relationships. And because they had taken care of people and they knew that where they were going took care of people, that helped accelerate some of the growth, because we would get referrals from them. And then, our clients, we retain them for a long period of time. They're happy. We're always doing the right thing. We have check-ins with them and asking questions, anybody else that we could help. And you need to call this person. They're, I met them in a CEO group and they mentioned XYZ to me, or I'd get phone calls. I'd probably get 2 calls a week from a client referral when things were really moving. And we had some of those 50% growth years, which I'll tell you, I like 30 to 40%, 50%, while it looks good on paper, is a little scary, because you can outgrow your service delivery, and then you will have retention problems. So I think we always did a really good job making sure our service delivery was up to snuff with our growth, and we weren't going to have the issues that you would have with high growth years. We added the right people, made changes, and we constantly looked at metrics and ticket counts and utilization, and made sure that we weren't getting ahead of ourselves and just, adding revenue and not supporting it the proper way. Because if you're not doing the back office piece as you're growing, that's when the retention starts, right? That's when the churn starts happening. And then you're constantly replacing revenues. And we didn't have to do a lot of revenue replacement that wasn't known. So we just didn't lose clients. That's a huge part of it. Was if we lost 2 clients a year, that'd be a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different now. There's so much M&A going on, right? There's a lot more activity in that regard. And that's what I call uncontrollable. But we had a lot of opportunity to control things. We were very consistent in our service delivery. We answered the phone, again, good, bad, ugly. You just pick up the phone, you take the call, and you make the thing right. And I'm not giving any nuggets because it's just things that happen by doing a bunch of little things. But I think the consistency is the big piece of it. And that's probably one word that people forget about is you have to be extremely consistent in your process, how you treat your clients, how you manage the team, what the expectations are of everybody, and communicate it.
Yeah. And what was it you ended up as like the growth, year average growth?
I think if I look back on it, it was like 25.7 or something weird. And it seemed like every third year was a 50% growth year early on. And then we did get stuck. We got stuck in that $6.2 million range for a few years. And COVID surely didn't help that. I would say, one of the big reasons is we had a very large one-time hardware implementation that really accelerated our growth one year. And then once that one-time hit was gone, I had to replace all that. Well, the good news is I replaced it all with service revenue, right? But we ended up flatlining. Sure. And that was the first time that ever happened. And I'm in my mind, that was a defeat, right? It was like, oh my God. But then when you think about truly what you accomplished from a one-off to a recurring model, we were up in the 75% recurring range. We were not anywhere near that before. I'm thinking huge wins that year. And then that same client, when we had taken them on, he had sold a company, worked out his non-compete, and decided he was going to do it bigger, better, faster this time. And we started setting up offices for him left and right. And I told him, when you get to about 250 employees, you're going to start questioning how much it is to use us versus having your own team. And let's just make sure we work through this. We talk through it so neither one of us have to make these really drastic changes. Well, he got to about 700 employees. And then we're in a meeting and he's like, IT expenses. I said, hold on. And actually, he didn't say it. It was his chief of staff and a couple other people. And then he stopped them. He said, look, to Greg's credit, he said, when we got here, we needed to start having these conversations. I didn't drive those conversations. Things have been working, but you guys are right. We need to start insourcing. We need to build our own team. So I was very thankful he remembered the conversation, honestly, which is good because that's part of partnering with the right people, right? Is you each have each other's back. It's a real partnership. So what we had to unpack, though, was about $100,000 a month in service revenue. So after this one year, then the next year, like, okay, well, now we just lost about $100,000 in service revenue. Like, what do we do? How do we not lay off people? Well, again, we had another one of those growth years. So this is like 2018, 2019. So we picked up a ton of service revenue again that year. We replaced it. We didn't have to transition anybody out. It was a huge win for me, but again, felt like a defeat because you're looking at numbers. You're like, well, here we are again, the same top line revenue. Yeah. And I think it's okay to realize that some years are building years, right? And sometimes and in this case, it was a great growth year, just not revenue. Yeah. Great growth on it was a replacement based upon something that should have probably happened 2 years prior, and happened over time versus the Band-Aid get ripped off. Good news is they're a co-managed client, right? So they kept a lot of other things, but it still was painful. And then you get done with that, and I bought a brand new building. I'm excited. I'm like, listen, we've never had our own space. I get to make it what I want it, make this fun, engaging environment. And we move in December of 2019. Don't even have time to put pictures on the walls and everybody go home. So we have, a brand new office, 8,500 square feet of space and 3 to 6 people working in it every day, social distancing. So then, COVID hits, and again, a lot of people, we do per user billing. A lot of people had layoffs. A lot of people had furloughing. We got out of that year with less than 1% revenue differentiated. So It was, again, sitting around 6.2 million going, is this going to be the number that I get stuck at? And I seen it with people where they get to 1.5 to 2, then like, okay, how do I get to 3? Then how do I get to 5? Then how do I and you have these weird hurdles that seem to be very similar across the industry. And I felt like all the other ones, I'm like, well, the other ones were effortless. Like, what's going on? Like, why now? And why this new, dilemma going across our world of everybody working from home and businesses having all these problems. And good news is we didn't deal with hospitality. We didn't deal with retail. So those were the people that got shut down. Our professional service companies were still doing things. Now the doctor's office is a little bit different, right? They were still open. They just probably saw less patients, so some things slowed down there. The nonprofits for sure had furloughing and layoffs, and we had a good chunk of those. So then I was like, well, let's take this year and let's start building out some things. We brought in the director of ops at the time that became VP, that's now COO, and we're like, let's start building out the processes and the procedures. And I think that's about the time I was approached. I was like, it's not the right year to sell. I'm making all these investments to make sure the infrastructure is here. So when we come out of this pandemic, we're ready to go. Because I really believe like we're going to get out of this in 6 months, which wasn't exactly the case, right? It kind of lingered. It's still kind of lingering
Right.
if you want to be serious. But so I wanted to build the infrastructure, do the things, and that impacted profitability, impacted a lot of things. But we also saw a lot of IT companies failing during COVID. So for what we were losing with people furloughing and laying off, we were bringing on an account here and there and kind of stabilizing their environments. On-sites went down, so we had less professional services. So there was a lot of bad that happened and a lot of good. And then you look at it again at the end of the year, like, well, here we are again, same number. So then in 2021, some growth started accelerating, and I was glad we had the plan in place and got things corrected and got them to where we needed to be. And then that continued on through 2022. And that's when I got to the point of realizing that, it's been a long, challenging road, and I'd like to protect my family and take some chips. And then figure out what my next move is. Like, what do I want to do? And it's not that I felt that Atlas was perfect. There is no company I believe is perfect. You've got to constantly work on it. But I knew it was in a really good place operationally and a really good place financially. And there's very few MSPs, I believe, that can get those two accomplished.
Yeah.
And I would say, based upon what I see now, maybe 20% have really good financial acumen and really understand the metrics and drivers in their businesses. And that's what I hope to change to make them stronger, better, help them understand that, finance is a great place for you to add value to your business. Because again, you look at whether you're doing device counts, user counts, you have all your licensing. How often are people auditing that? Most people are looking at it and say, oh, I do it quarterly, or we try to do it monthly, and they're not using systems and they're not checking. There's so much opportunity for lift there. It's kind of crazy. But
so you got Atlas to a place where you're operationally and financially in a really good spot. What drove that decision? And obviously I think a lot of people are going, I need to consider an exit. Why? What else did you consider, and why did you ultimately choose Lyra?
So my goal it's the same simple goal I had from the beginning of our conversation, was I wanted to get out of my own way. I wanted to focus on what I was good at. And while I was really good as a consultant, really good as a tech, I don't believe that's where my value was in the business. And I believe my value was spending time with the vision, with the team, with the clients and partners and in the community, building the business. And then literally people would laugh because like, oh, you just come in and you just hand it off. Well, it wasn't quite as drastic as that sounds. It's not like I handed them off a bag of, burning crap that they had to step on their porch. It was like, there might be some modification in there to how we would do something. And then I'd have to talk through the reason why, or why we weren't adding this component, right? We're doing this instead. Mm-hmm. Or if there was any type of compromise. But for the most part, it was, 9 out of 10, it was pretty darn accurate to our services. And I also worked very hard to define, this is all we sell. This is all we do. We're no longer in the business of doing these things. What are we really, really good at? And then just narrow that down. Because this is probably another problem if we go back to people that are struggling with growth and getting over certain hurdles. they'll have 6, 7, 8 different backup solutions.
Mm-hmm.
Get a good, better, best, right? Here's the 3 we offer. They'll have 10 different EDRs. Pick one. Right? You support one. If a customer has this weird, or if you're Sentinel-1 and your customer has Defender, you can probably work with that, right? Stay within 1 to 2. Don't go crazy and just let everybody willy-nilly pick their own stuff. Because what happens is your techs have to be masters at everything. You have to buy it from 8 different sources. You're not getting the cost savings by having a bunch of bulk with somebody else. Mm-hmm. You can save 20 cents an endpoint across 10,000 endpoints. That's real money. It starts adding up pretty quick. Yeah. So I think some people lose sight of having a more efficient service delivery model with the tools they deploy, because it goes down to the training of the team, their expertise, your client's environment, because clients' environments can be pretty unique, if it's an engineering firm versus a law firm versus a doctor. So why complicate it with all these extra tools too? So anyways, that was part of it. I forget where I was at with that, so I apologize.
So what is you said, it made sense to move on, right? Exit and focus on kind of what you're best at. What is that, and how did you figure that out? That's hard for most of us.
It was hard. I didn't take the decision lightly. There's a boutique investment firm in Tampa that's a client now too, as a result of the process. But I sat down with them and went through, if we were going to do something, what that would look like, who would be our suitors. And it felt like I was going to be attending or actually the person on Bachelor or something, right? I was going to go on all these dates. I was going to kiss all these companies and I was going to pick one. And I'm like, this just feels dirty. But what I knew is that I didn't want to be a platform, even though being a platform generally would give you a little bit more money on the front end. I said, I either want to run the MSP or work for the PE group. I don't want to do both. And as a platform, I feel like you probably don't have a choice. You're going to be doing both. And at some levels, you're always going to, but not necessarily that granular. And I also didn't want to then join another group and have a roll up happening and have all the employees lose the profit share I put in place for them. All the employees have to change their benefits, get rehired, probably have somebody come in and axe a couple people because we weren't exactly lean, but we were, we weren't fat either, but there's definitely always somebody that can be displaced. So I didn't want to see that happen. So I was very protective of the team. And then I started thinking about, what would the community think? What would the clients think? Like, how can I make sure this transition isn't just good for Greg, it's good for all? And then the opportunity came up with Evergreen, and it was a different model, right? Their model is very much a buy and hold philosophy. They believe in the Berkshire Hathaway model of investing in family-owned businesses, and you keep the relationship as close to possible with the customer in a decentralized fashion. That doesn't mean that we won't consolidate some things, like we take advantage of vendor pricing, right? We get bulk rates by having 80 companies that buy a lot, which is sometimes difficult to negotiate because we can't tell them to use that product, nor would we, because we don't want their teams to have to change. And that's another piece of it, right? If we rolled up, probably deploy a different R&M, probably deploy a different security stack, probably we're told what to do every point in this equation. So the Evergreen model is super intriguing. They believe in decentralization. I did what I always do, and I'm not always the easiest person to work with. So I definitely pushed and test in every opportunity I had. When something would come up, I'm like, well, I'm going to see how they respond to this. And every time I would do that, the response was, yeah, you got it. It's perfect. And a couple of the instances were where I was spending my time. And right after the sale, one of the things I wanted to test was, how lenient are they going to be with me living the lifestyle that they told me I could live prior to selling the business? And my intent was to go on a vacation with my wife and her sister and her partner. And we had this whole vacation plan. I was going to come back and host Thanksgiving at our house here in Tampa, and the house wasn't ready. So I was like, well, we're going to go away to the mountains for a week and a half for Thanksgiving, right after being gone for a week and a half. And I'm basically taking the entire month of November off, and I sold the business in October, right? This is going to go magically. Yeah. And they were basically, everything's good. You're hitting your numbers. You have the team in place. You don't necessarily have to be there every waking moment. And I'm like, okay, well that's a test, right? And then there was a 6-figure plus resource I wanted to hire. Normally I would just pull the trigger because I know I need it. This is what I need it for. So I spent not necessarily a day, but a considerable amount of time putting together the areas of business they would support, what the revenue opportunity was, what type of backlog they'd be cleaning up for us, how quick that would hit cash flow, like all the things, right? And I'm ready to present. I'm getting on a Teams call with my boss, and he's like, "You've hired people for 16 plus years. I don't give a shit." I was like, "Oh, so I can run the business how I'm supposed to." Got it. So there was little tests like that I did that reassured me that I picked the right partner. And it's hard to do that prior, right? Like anything. And but I did interview at least 3 other companies that I knew from other people in peer groups and things that had gone through the process. And when you tell me you sold your company in 2018, now it's 2022, and you're still there and you're still happy, like that means a lot.
Yeah.
So the intent of it was not to disrupt the business, not to disrupt the community, and keep things status quo. And what's cool is the name stays the same. Again, I gave up. I didn't give up, but I gave up money to keep profit share in place because you get paid on profit. And I didn't want to sell the company. Then the next day go to everybody and be like, "Oh, that thing we used to do where you guys all got these cool checks in your 401k. Well, that no longer happens either, but I'm good." So I didn't want to do that to them. So that was really important. They're really easy to honor those type of commitments. And I was happy running Atlas. I mean, I had, admittedly, I've had to admit to a couple people, I had the job down a couple days a week. It's again, not perfect, but I had a lot of people and a lot of teams in place that took care of the core components. And I was mostly client relations, vision, things like that. And I was very strategic with my time because I know how much time I put in on the front end. I wanted to get to a place where I had it running very smoothly. And I was out of my own way. And then they approached me well ahead of when they were supposed to approach me, or when I thought they were going to approach me, I should say, about an opportunity to lead a region. And, part of me has always wanted to take all the lessons I've learned and see if I could replicate those across multiple MSPs and do something in a consulting capacity with MSPs.
Sure.
So when they said, "We'd like to pay you to do that," I was like, well, that sounds fun. So it's been an interesting journey. I started that. Technically, the role was formed in January of last year. I didn't have my replacement at Atlas till mid-July up and running. He started in April, and mid-July, I felt pretty confident. He's got it with the team in place, and he's still got me locally, so he can call me anytime he wants. Then I started leaning in on the region. So far, the reception and the impact's been great. I mean, my biggest concern was, are there people like me who's going to feel like somebody's coming and kicking sand in their play box, right? Mm-hmm. And the difference, I guess the outcome was a little bit different than I expected, where people were like, "Oh, thank you for diving in at this level. Nobody's helped me look at this on this piece of operations or the finance piece." And, super helpful to me because our incentives are in line, right? They get paid compensation plus, performance type of, comp. So everything kind of jives and makes sense. And it was an interesting selection process, but I guess, meeting with that investment banking company, seeing all the different things out there, and then realizing that there was an opportunity to do one. And there's a couple options on that front that's a little bit more hands off and decentralized, was the right decision for me. And that's just my perspective. There's other people that would rather be part of a roll up. That's exciting to them. There's people that want to be a platform. That's exciting to them. But that wasn't what I wanted, what I thought was best for my team and my community, I guess. So,
well, this will be an interesting one. What's the most, what's the biggest lesson you've learned in all your years in business?
Man, it's probably gonna sound cheesy, but it's the whole fail thing, right? I believe in failing forward, and I believe that fail is, first attempt in learning. And you need to take moderate risks. I'm not a big one for like the aggressive, like let's just go this direction really, really fast. Like, do little fire little test bullets. Take some risks. Not everything is going to pay out, but as long as you do them in a strategic way, that's not aggressive, you can learn from it and you can improve and move forward. So some of those lessons, for me, were we're going to do remote only agreements in addition to these agreements. Well, then now I've got a different way I have to track time. Not all the time gets accounted for properly. And what I should have done is just went to the client, gave them 10% more and did the on-site or something, right? Like that was a lesson for us. And that's not a lesson for everybody, but it's a lesson that I learned. And I was also given away, a lot. There's all kinds of little goofy things of lessons about, what to do, where to focus, where to value your time, so.
Mm-hmm. If you could do one thing differently or over, what would that be?
Not be afraid to invest in sales. I think a lot of us, especially early on, as we're doing this and we're building out teams, we have this thought that, if they don't get any sales within 3 months, we got to cut them loose, right? Because the carrying cost is so high. They're not us. They don't have those pre-built relationships. They're not embedded in the community the same way. They may not have the executive presence, but all those things they can gain over time. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, it would have been defining more regimented sales tactics to make sure they're doing their activities, because sales isn't going to come from one or two places. There's like 30 different areas you have to focus on, right? Believe it or not, you should still be making your phone calls, right? Regardless of what you think the success rate is, it's a way to get rid of a bunch of no's, right? Mm-hmm. You've got to do your in-persons. You've got to do some LinkedIn. You've got to go to networking meetings. You got to meet with existing clients. There's all these activities you have to do. And I think for me, it would be investing in sales earlier on and not making sales the, Greg Zolkos, committee of sales. Mm-hmm. Because we did it a few times. We had some people that worked really well, and that would last for short stints. And then, they would either move on or just the demands would just not meet what the expectations were. So I think that's one that's always tough for people, is on the sales side and being consistent with it. So
what did you do differently? Like if you had somebody that did work, but then it kind of flatlined, like what was the lesson from that?
More time coaching and leaning in. I think the other areas of the business, we were really good at the coaching and the development. I think on the sales, it was like they're kind of off in the ether and you kind of leave them to do their own thing. And I think, spending more time with them, nurturing them, teaching them the habits, teaching them, the rebuttal process or what to look for, even basic listening skills, because oftentimes salespeople like to talk over the client, tell them how good everything's going to be. But if you just listen to them, they're going to tell you all the crap that's broken.
That's right.
And as long as you can present them the value, and I used to do that with data versus just saying, because listen, if you ask me like, oh, how do I know your service is going to be better? I mean, well, you don't know till you try us, right? That's what a lot of people say. And it's like, we can't be better, worse than the last guy. I'm like, is that really a selling tactic, right? Is that good? Or do you say that like, look, on average, our first call resolution is 77%. We have companies in your industry that are as high as 85. I can show you that in some dashboards and explain to you why that's important. It's important because we're getting your end user off the call as quick as possible, meaning they can go back to their job. We're not passing you around. We're not having to escalate. We're not having to call back. We're not having to do all these things. So we're just a much more efficient delivery process. And our time per ticket is this, and our average response time is this, and kind of go through like the back end processes. They're like, oh, wow, they know their processes. They know what, they know it's going to cost me a lot to have an attorney stuck on a phone 2 or 3 times, right? They start getting it. I think being able to sell to the value and explain the story, because, telling them that you're better than them and that's your value add, just that's not enough.
that won't differentiate you in one way, right?
No. And it's again, 8 out of 10 customers are probably going to tell you our user onboardings and terminations suck. And then if you can clearly articulate to them what process you have in place for that and why that process is better than the last one they've had, or even the fact that you have a process and the last person did, that might be just enough to win their hearts. So I think going through that and saying, these are the things we do in the process. Again, there's humans involved. It's not perfect. We're going to make mistakes, but we do this, and this to make sure they're ready to go the first time they show up for work, because that's a reflection on you just as much as it is for us, because we're an outsourced company doing that project for you. So,
Yeah.
So it's just, and again, all the rebuttals are different. Could be price, could be, but again, during the pricing conversation, did they say, you're 3 times my last quote? Okay, understood. Do you mind sharing with me the details? Not necessarily the price, but just the details, so I can make sure that we're comparing apples to apples. And you look at it, you're like, well, they're not including on-site. So in addition to your monthly invoice, how many other invoices do you get from? Oh, they send us a ton.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think? What do you think the value of that is? It's another 24 grand a year. I'm like, okay, well now we're 66%. You know what I mean? We're almost quite there. I said, and the first time we met, you told me you and Janice are spending 10 hours a week on IT related issues. Like, what would you think your time is worth, and how valuable would that be if you're just a point of contact and you only had to get in touch with us when things weren't going right because we weren't taking care of your users? So you go through all that, and before you're done, they're like, shut up and just send me the quote. Like, it just makes it isn't 3 times you're giving us our life back. And, so if you listen to them, they're going to tell you how to solve their pain. So I think that's a big one, is spending time with the salespeople on how they listen, what they listen for, right? Role playing, as goofy as it sounds, like I'm starting to do this now, even at my level with the growth leaders at their individual companies. Like, how do I get them through the process till they get more at bats with me, so they're more comfortable when they get in front of the client, and help them like build out their quotes and make sure all the things that are in there that should be in there. Because again, they're notorious for saying, oh, well, we'll just add that later. Well, we should probably start with that instead of trying to upsell them on that later. We should say, this is what our standards package looks like, because it's going to do X, Y, Z. So I think there's a lot of that with just spending. I think that would be my downfall, is not spending as much time with them, because we probably could have been a completely different company. And account management, realizing the importance of that. I mean, I did push that off to a lot of the senior level techs early on. And for me, it was more of a trust factor, because that's how I sold. I was a tech. I was a confidant to them, right? They go to you, they're like, well, he's a technical resource, he's not selling me anything, which was true. I was solving for problems, not trying to sell just to sell. That was never my motto. And maybe that's why I struggled with salespeople, because they sell to sell and I sold to solve. So I have a fundamental breakdown there, but I'm still working on it.
Yeah.
So, but no, I mean, early on, I'd have the higher level techs doing it. Well, then it was distracting for them to worry about like the quoting, the upsell, and all the things they were trying to do in addition to supporting the clients. And it became almost like a conflict of interest. So we didn't get this right until just before I left Atlas, and we started putting things in place with, here's some really good technical resources with amazing soft skills, right? That can do this and do the hand holding and do the key BRs and explain to them like why these technologies are important in their environment, and make sure that things weren't getting dropped and that budgets were put in place prior to the year start. So they had an idea of like how to frame up their environment and plan for that. So I think those are the 2 areas that could have probably changed the company for the better. Not that we did bad, but that was definitely a couple areas of improvement. And I think early on, it was tracking things like license renewals and warranties, and the things that you would find out after you're out there servicing, like, oh crap, we never renewed their firewall, we need to do that. Well, then, we started documenting all that and putting workflows in place. It notified us 90 days in advance, hey, we need to renew this. So there's not only the service piece of that it solves for, right? There's the piece for the client, and then there's a revenue opportunity. There's money sitting there that you're just not capturing. So those are things I did a little bit later that I should have done sooner.
Sure. Well, given where you are now and all the things going on in business and in the world, what's something you're looking forward to right now?
Oh, man. Let's see. I don't know. I look forward to the new M&A opportunities, to be honest with you, because I think it's an opportunity to take and implement best practices all over again, right? Because as we grow out this new model of what I'm doing today, and there's 9 businesses underneath my region, I've already started implementing these things, and I'm further along in their journey. And so we already have a lot of systems in place. Again, not perfect. We're constantly working on it. But the new M&A is fun because you have an opportunity to learn more about not just the owner or the owners, right? But their teams, their community, their clients, Part of my why was always how, as I built out Atlas, I look at it as like, okay, there's 10 people, and those 10 people have spouses, girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever, significant others. They have families. Some of them support their parents, and they support charities and all the things they're doing. Like, how many lives am I impacting at 10? And you say, well, now that we're 50, how many lives am I impacting there? And now at the regional level, as we do these things, like, I have an opportunity for a greater reach. And that's part of my why personally, is like, how do I build stronger, teams, communities, things like that. And what are they doing to give back, and what areas are they involved? And that to me is the fun part. You can see the output from that. And, as you talk to them, you see what they're passionate about and what opportunities like this career or our companies have been able to provide for them and their families. And that's super cool. So, but
I love that. On the flip side, what's your biggest challenge?
My biggest challenge is time. Part of the reason why I sold the company the time I did was to spend more time, with the family and be present, which I'm really good at. And combined, Nikki and I have 5 daughters. So there's a lot of time there with cheerleading and dance and school and all the other activities. And I think the difference is I want to be present for everybody, and Teams is great for that, right? But physically being present at some of the operating companies is important. So making sure that I structure that time where I'm not taking it away from the family in like a manageable capacity. Like, that's where I probably would say my biggest challenge is making sure that I'm present where I need to be present when I need to be present. And that means, one of the most difficult things most of us have, I think, is saying no, right? And there was an opportunity recently, and it was a Monday through Wednesday, and it was in Texas, and I was like, I'm staying with the family. There's not a compelling need for me to be there. There's a want for me to be there, right? And I would like to be there as well, but I also know that this job has a different level of travel component associated with it now than when I was running my local company. So
sure,
I value that probably the most. And that's another thing that they're super supportive and good about, right? If it's important, I'll be there. There's no question. But when it's just like we love you to be here thing, it's like,
yeah.
So I'd say that's my biggest challenge is the time piece. The biggest challenge I see in MSPs right now is finance. And it seems to be pretty consistent. And it's not that, they're absolutely atrocious at it. I think there's just better things they could be doing to make their processes more efficient and then capture lost revenue. So automated bill and reconciliations and how they're auditing Microsoft and things like that. Like, a lot of that can happen electronically. And not have all the misses people are having because they're paying for things that they're not billing for, or they're paying for things they're not using. And there's just a lot of that happens. And I would say on average, it's at least $2,000 a company, and that can add up really quick. So that's a big one for me.
Yeah. What's the one book you'd recommend?
So I am more of I'll do a lot of listening to podcasts, and I do mostly what I really enjoy there is more of a Simon Sinek type of thing, where he's going over like the why and like the stories of how to be a great leader and those things. Those things resonate with me more. But I will read not necessarily Cliff Notes, but like the shorter, condensed versions of things to get the point across or message. It's something that I've never gotten behind, and it drives me absolutely bonkers. I'll bring a book on a flight, and I'm going to read the book, and I fall asleep.
That's funny.
It's just, I don't know if it's just not, I'm not finding the right content, or if it's just that my mind just works different, and the reading of passages is like drowns me, I guess, versus like visual stimulation and other things.
Oh yeah.
So it's a weird one, but yeah.
No, I think there's a good bit of our industry that struggles with different things to focus, and then
could be my ADD. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's ADD. There's all kinds of things that can contribute, and then as my wife calls it, some of them are just broccoli books. Like they're just like you probably should eat your broccoli, but like I don't usually get super excited about the broccoli.
I don't. I think the last book I really read was Traction, and that's because we have a initiative to implement EOS at every operating company because they need some type of operating system rhythm and structure to them that like shares the vision with the team, holds them accountable to goals, right? They have their issues list they can get through and they make it easy. And it keeps everybody kind of in sync. So I think that would be the last book I read. But again, I might have fallen asleep a couple times.
Sure. Well, for folks that enjoyed this or would love to reach out and find you, connect with you online, what's the best way to do that?
I mean, LinkedIn, pretty easy. It's under Gregory Zolkos, and I do that on purpose because if somebody starts it off with Gregory, I know they don't know me. So it's generally I go by Greg. And then, my email is just first initial, last name at lyratechgroup.com. So it'd be gzolkos at lyratechgroup.com. Pretty easy to find. There's not a lot of Zolkoses out there. So it's Zolkos, by the way. Always a great way to get a hold of me is either email or probably LinkedIn.
Make sure to take Greg up on that opportunity. This is amazing. I learned so much. Thank you for being on MSP Mindset today, Greg.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Damien.